of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
We survived our chilling encounter in the frozen tombs of Telos, and I'm pretty confident that we witnessed the final defeat of the emotionless Cybermen, and they definitely won't be back again in a few stories' time. And now we're up a mountain, surrounded by hairy grunting beasts that smell of yak. We must be somewhere near Leicester. I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time and Space. Let's waste no more time and get up to speed with where we are in the story. The Tibetan monks at the monastery of Detsen are worried, frightened men. Many of their companions have been killed, and it seems the Yeti are the cause of all their troubles. But normally the Yeti, giant man-like creatures living in the remotest peaks of the Himalayas, are seen only very rarely and are notoriously timid. What is the explanation for their apparent transformation into ferocious brutes, monsters with glowing eyes and savage fangs, who are spreading death and destruction in the isolated Valley of Peace? When the Doctor arrives at the monastery, his first visit for 300 years, he expects to be welcomed with open arms. But because of the mysterious killings, the reception that awaits him is anything but friendly. And we'll be back after this.
From climbing boots, I really think you ought to wear something warm.
I tell you, I'm a Highlander. The cold doesn't affect me.
There's a great deal of difference between the Highlands and the Himalayas, James.
Aye, they're bigger.
Oh, there you are, Doctor. I found this bell thing you were looking for.
Oh, splendid, splendid.
Is the monastery far? Can we come too?
Yes. No. One thing at a time, Victoria. We must find this Ghanta.
Oh, here. Is this where we're going? Detsen?
Detsen, yes. That's the name of the monastery, but I'm afraid you're not going. Well, not yet a while, anyway.
Doctor.
No, I think it'd be better if I went alone. You've seen something, haven't you? Would it not be better if I went with you?
Is there something dangerous then, Doctor?
Oh, good heavens, no! No, there's nothing for you to worry about. Now, you stay here with Jamie, inside, and I'll be as quick as I can.
Oh, Doctor.
Oh, I nearly forgot it.
And welcome back. And we've been joined by the wonderful Nicholas Pegg. Hello, Nick.
Hello there, Mark. Hello, Iain. How lovely to be back. Thank you for having me.
Hello.
Well, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. We've had a bit of a change of format since you were last on,
Okay.
so apologies in advance, but Iain, I believe it's time for a bit of business.
Oh, Mark, how right you are. It's time for Nick to face the Mind Probe.
What? No, not the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect.
and we know we've done this 8,000 times, and they've all been amazing. But I feel like that was the closest. That was textbook.
Bless you for that.
That's the gold standard.
I wish I could say that I'd been, rehearsing that, but I didn't actually know. So that's just straight out of my Five Doctors sad sort of memory bank.
That's amazing. Now, I haven't written down my spiel, so I've got to do this from memory. So this is where my abilities as an actor fall screaming to the floor.
Okay.
Nick, satisfy the Mind Probe, and after the show you will be returned to your customary time and place. But if you fail the quest, then Castellan Cockram here is itching to toss you into the time lash.
Okay. I see. This is where we are, is it? Okay.
So it's a win-win, really.
That's the level. That's the level we
That's
have.
the level that we're operating on. Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's good. Nice to know early on.
You know the low-hanging fruit. We tend to try and aim lower than that.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent stuff.
So we've got 6 questions here. They're all tenuously related in some way or other to the story we're here to talk about.
Okay.
So if you're ready, I will
As ready as I'll ever be.
Brilliant. Okay, question 1. This story features the myth of the Yeti, also known as the Abominable Snowmen. What is the equivalent myth in the Pacific Northwest?
In the Pacific Northwest, I assume we're talking about America there, so we're talking about Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, yes?
Correct. How
All
right
right.
you are.
he's good.
Tick. I've put a tick there.
Good. So far,
Question
so
2.
good.
So far it's brilliant.
Not for me.
Well, no one's going to ask you any questions, Mark. I'm not a cruel
All
man.
right. Okay.
That's what I say that I am. Question 2. What was the name of the Kate Bush song about the Yeti?
Oh, gosh, I ought to know that, obviously. It's called... what's it called? It's called Wild Man, isn't it?
It is called Wild Man.
Thank God for that.
I'm just filling that in because that's
I went
that's the
totally
one
blank
answer
there
I
for a
forgot to
moment.
write down.
Yeah. I'm a massive Kate Bush fan, but my brain went completely blank. This is what you're doing to me. Okay, yeah, no, Wild Man. Of course it's
Well,
Wild
I
Man.
don't
It's a
know.
wonderful
I
song.
don't know if it's. It might just be me, but I feel like that album of all of her work is perhaps the least memorable in a number of ways. But that, just be me.
I love it. But well, look, it's because we're all getting old, and it's a recent one, isn't it? I mean, it's not that recent. It's more than 10 years old, but even so, it's more recent than the other. So it's probably just that. But no, I love that album. But you're absolutely right. I don't know it as well as any of the others because it hasn't been around as long. But I'll get there in the end. No, I love it though. Well, that's a wonderful song.
Great. Good. Right, well, let's move the conversation away from pop stars you're keenly a fan of. Question 3. In the introduction to the animation of Raymond Briggs's The Snowman, the pop star David Bowie reclaims his old scarf, which he claims was given to him by the Snowman. True or false? It was tucked away in the top right-hand drawer of the attic desk.
Oh no. You rotters! I don't know that. I'm gonna say false because it's the left-hand drawer. I don't know though.
Oh God, you're good.
Hey, all right. Yes.
I bet you've. I bet that's going to be in the index of one of your books. Attic top left-hand drawer.
Did you?
That's amazing.
Oh well, thank you very much for that. There was a bit of a fluke actually. Did you see? Sorry to keep interrupting your fabulous quiz. Did you see Duncan Jones, David Bowie's son?
Oh yes.
Recently,
Wasn't that
last
fantastic?
Christmas, or was it even the Christmas before? Some Christmas recently, anyway. Tweeted that he'd found the scarf, the actual scarf that David Bowie used, and of course, Duncan was a lad of 11 or 12 or something at the time that Bowie did the snowman thing, and I mean, it was just so sweet, and he did a little video with the scarf. God, it was lovely. Anyway, yes, next question.
It was great.
I'm a bit emotional now, and suddenly question 4 seems rather shallow and facile, but
Okay.
I'll go with it. True or false? Billy Idol has released a cover version of Frosty the Snowman.
I have seriously no idea about that. Billy Idol released a cover version of Frosty the Snowman. That's so bonkers that I'm going to say it's true.
It is true. It was on his absolutely astonishing Christmas album that he put out. Again, about maybe 10 years ago.
Good Lord.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Amazing.
Seriously. Put it on at Christmas time and the tears will flow.
So is it called Nice Day for a White Christmas, presumably, or something like that?
It's something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Anyway,
Well, I shall look
question
that up.
5.
Yeah.
It's a one listen wonder, but no one's ever gone back for a second. Question 5. Who wrote the 1957 fantasy horror film The Abominable Snowman, based on his own BBC television play The Creature?
Well, I'm going to that is undoubtedly Mr. Nigel Neal of Quatermass fame.
This is an absolute demolition.
It's so good. So
Well,
good.
I'm saying it can only the more the better I keep doing, I can, pride comes before a fall. What am I trying to say? I'm going to go disastrously wrong on the next one.
Well, no, not if you know the film. In the same film, 1957's Abominable Snowmen, do we find Christopher Lee or do we find Peter Cushing?
Oh, God, you see, I've gone blank again. It's Cushing. It's Peter Cushing. Isn't it?
It is Cushing.
Yay!
That is 6 out of 6. You've got them all right.
All right.
Well, how disappointing.
Castellan Cockram is empty-handed and will remain
again.
so.
You go home empty-handed.
It's
Oh, well, there we
Typical
go.
for me.
It's never the same, because you see now he's in a bad mood and the rest of the show's going to be really tricky trying to
Sorry
get him
about
to
that.
engage.
Properly
but,
grumpy now. Yeah.
we'll do what we can.
I can only
That
apologise.
was incredible.
Well,
Very impressive.
Bless your heart. There were a couple of absolute guesses in there. The Bowie Snowman one and the Billy Idol one could have gone either way. But, yeah. Thank you very much. Well, I feel very proud. And do I get some kind of trophy or something? Or...
We should have some sort of mug
yeah.
that we can send.
Yeah. Or a little Yeti figurine, maybe. Like the ones that...
Yeah. I've got an old Blue Yeti microphone in the cupboard that I don't use anymore.
Oh, okay. No, that'll do.
That. Pop your address
honestly,
in the chat.
You don't want it, Nick.
No, I don't really, to be honest. That's okay. That's fine. You keep it. It's okay.
Can't even give it away.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that was fantastic. But anyway, enough of that shenanigans. Let's have a chat about the Abominable Snowmen.
Lovely.
Nick, what's your relationship with this story?
Well, you asked me some time ago if I'd like to choose a Patrick Troughton story, and my thoughts tended towards this one, actually for all sorts of reasons. First and foremost, that I just really like it, so that's good. It does, though, just so happen that it's my birth sign Doctor Who story. I was born under the sign of episode 6 of the Abominable
Surely
Snowmen.
not.
Yeah, I know I look like I'm only about 12, but actually I was born on the 4th of November 1967, the same day as episode 6 of the Abominable Snowmen.
Wow.
So that kind of seems to fit. But no, I just really like it. It's I've got a soft spot for Doctor Who stories that are sort of underdog stories, and I don't think anyone actually...
Well, speaking as a fan of the Horns of Nimon, I mean...
Well, there you go. There you go, you see. Because I suppose I ought to put my cards on the table here and hopefully not make hundreds of enemies right at the beginning of this, but I'm going to confess that sort of middle Troughton isn't really my favourite period of Doctor Who. In fact, it's not even my favourite bit of the Troughton era. I think that the beginning and the end of the Troughton era, in their own different ways, are kind of more interesting and peculiar and rewarding and strange and unexpected than the middle bit. Although, of course, for a long time, the sort of received fan wisdom, I don't know if it still is, but it certainly used to be. When I was a kid reading Doctor Who Monthly way back in goodness knows when, we were always told that season 5 was the kind of pinnacle of the Troughton era, and
the monster season.
The monster season. And look, don't get me wrong, I love it. The cast is fantastic. There's some wonderful stories in there, but taken as a whole, I do find a fair chunk of it quite repetitious. The base under siege, the intransigent, shouty commander who refuses to listen to the Doctor's dire warnings about how he ought to believe the evidence of his computer or switch off the pump or whatever it might be. But in and among what I do find to be some rather samey stories, I think there are some real underrated beauties, and one of my personal favourites is The Abominable Snowmen. I don't know if it's underrated exactly, because like we said just now, it's not... I don't think many people think it's bad. I don't think people actively dislike it, but it's just sort of condemned to live in the shadow of the Web of Fear, isn't it? It's kind of... not only is it nobody's favourite Troughton story, it's not even anybody's favourite Yeti story. But I love it. I really love it.
It's probably not helped by the fact that it's largely not in existence in terms of what we can see. Luckily, we've got the audio soundtrack, and there have been attempts to try and help us along the way. So we've had Loose Cannon Recons.
Yes, and the animation,
and more recently we've had the animation.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Which, as you say, does help to kind of bring it back to life. And a lot of, missing or largely missing stories. It's so hard, it's impossible really to know what we would have been looking at, to see them for real and how wonderful that would be. But of course we do have one existing episode, so we've got an idea of the way that it's directed and what most of the sets look like and this sort of thing. But it kind of, with the missing stories, it sort of stands and falls on the soundtrack because it sort of has to, doesn't it? And I think the soundtrack of The Abominable Snowmen, it sounds just wonderful. You know, the cast is very good.
Yes.
It's got some very distinctive features, hasn't it, the soundtrack? I mean, not least the fact that it hasn't got any music, which is I love that. I love the lack of music in it. It was not something that would work in every story, but in this story it really kind of underlines the sense of this sort of desolate, remote place, and
cut off
and outside the monastery, even if it's in the studio, not on location obviously, but also in the studio scenes, but outside there's always this sort of howling wind in the background, and inside the monastery there's a sort of echo effect put on the voices, and then apart from that, you know, there's a bit of monastic chanting every now and then, and that's it. That's the soundscape. It's so bold, isn't it? It's quite unusual, and I think it's really distinctive.
I think it's a shame that so much of it is missing, because really it's got all those sort of visual things that you would really want from a story. You've got the fantastic location filming in Snowdonia.
Which is wonderful, isn't it? I mean, again, episode 2, if we are only allowed to have one episode, then episode 2 probably is quite a decent episode to have, because it's got a bit of location, got quite a lot of location filming, and it's got, you know, most of the sets, and, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful to see Padma Zambavar in action? But even so, we've got a good episode there, and that location filming.
I think the sets are really impressive as well.
They are, aren't they?
Because it's Lime Grove, I think, isn't it, for this one?
Is it Lime Grove? Is it? Oh, you know.
I thought maybe I misremembered.
You could be right.
I thought I remembered them saying they filmed it in Lime Grove.
You might be right. I thought they were pretty much at Television Centre by this stage full time, but no, you're probably right. I don't know. It's certainly I think the sets are fantastic though, don't they? It's Malcolm Middleton is the name of the designer, and it's the only Doctor Who.
Malcolm in the Middleton.
Malcolm in the Middleton. Yeah, it's the only Doctor Who he ever did, but he went on to do massive things. He was the production art director on things like Interview with a Vampire and Children of Men, which incidentally my fellow humanoid Barnaby is in Children of Men. So he has a direct link back to the Abominable Snowmen. I think the sets look fantastic. Just as that location filming, something that happens sort of late Hartnell and then into the Troughton period, it kind of kicks off with the Smugglers, really, doesn't it? Is that there is suddenly this sort of explosion of proper big location shoots, which the show had never really had before. I mean, The Smugglers was undoubtedly the biggest location shoot that Doctor Who had had up to that point. And then thereafter, there are quite... Obviously, you know, you get things like Gatwick Airport in The Faceless Ones and so on. But going to North Wales for The Abominable Snowmen, I don't know if it was the most sort of lavish location outing that they'd had so far, but it was certainly up there with them. And it's one of those stories, it's got location pretty much all the way through the story. Some stories with location filming, they just kind of top load episode 1 with a load of it, and then the rest of the stories in the studio. But it's not like that, is it? It's there all the way through, and it's really classy. I mean, okay, it would have been nice if there'd been some snow, but hey, they were filming in I think September, weren't they? Early September, so that was just not very likely to happen. But no, it looks fantastic, and the quality of it as well. Looking at the existing episode, it's really sharp, isn't it? I mean, of course, that's down to the restoration and things as well, but it just looks wonderful. Yeah. And something else I really like about The Abominable Snowmen, or that is very interesting about it anyway, is that I think it's actually a very influential Doctor Who story, even though it's not one that people kind of point to as one of the sort of milestones. I think it actually kind of is, because from round about the War Machines onwards, you've got Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis, and then by this stage, Peter Bryant sort of gradually but radically rewriting the Doctor Who rulebook. The format is kind of changing. You know, it's by the time we get to The Abominable Snowmen, it's no longer the show that it was when it started, and that's fine. That's evolution, you know. But watching The Abominable Snowmen again, as I did with the animation and the existing episode before we did this, I was really struck by quite how many familiar, sort of dependable Doctor Who ideas and sort of tropes get their very first outing in this story. You know, I mean, I think most obviously it's the first story that pivots on that central idea of a sort of science fiction explanation of a mythical creature, you know, so sort of later on you get demons and Egyptian gods and the Loch Ness Monster and things like that. But the Yeti's kind of the first one of those. And it's the first story that uses Buddhism as a sort of springboard for the storytelling, you know. And in fact, it does have quite a lot in common, I think, this story, with Planet of the Spiders. You know, a human makes contact with the malignant alien intelligence via transcendental meditation. You know, the kind of premise is quite similar. And
is it the same chant in both stories as well?
Absolutely. Om Mani Padme Hum happens in both. You're quite right.
Didn't Barry Letts, maybe I imagine this, but didn't Barry Letts want to include that because he was obviously into Buddhism? I think he wanted to redress the balance that was set up by this story in order to put Buddhism in a slightly more positive light.
I think you could be right. I remember hearing somewhere, I don't know if Terence Dicks said this at some point, but I think I'm right in saying that, you know, Terence Dicks, of course, wrote the novelisation of The Abominable Snowmen in the 70s at the time that he was working with Barry on the show. And in the novelisation, Terence did actually sort of, well, what should we say, correct a few of these slightly dodgy sort of or incoherent references to Buddhism. And this was apparently, you know, with a bit of help from Barry, who, of course, knew what he was talking about. So that's quite interesting. But so you know, it is quite, I think it's a story full of firsts. I mean, look, another one, I'm pretty sure, I mean, correct me if I've missed one, because it's possible, but I think that The Abominable Snowmen is also the first story that begins with that sort of archetypal Doctor Who teaser scene. You know, the opening scene where a hapless character with 2.5 lines gets struck down by a monster in the shadows. You know, and that's everything from Doctor Who and the Silurians to Attack of the Cybermen and whatever. But I think The Abominable Snowmen is 4 years in. This is the first story that actually starts with that scene. And actually, is it also the first story where it starts with someone getting killed, and then the TARDIS arrives, and then the Doctor is promptly blamed as the culprit? Because that's another kind of standard plot driver, isn't it? You know,
that is quite
robots
the trope,
of death,
isn't it? Yeah.
Earthshock, Planet of Evil, whatever. It's obviously, of course, it's the first story filmed in Wales, of which many more would follow. And it's the first story to use the foam machine as well, which is another Troughton era particularly
that's a
favourite,
staple, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think perhaps most importantly of all, and this is, you know, a kind of key, I think, to the way the story, you know, the impact that it has, I think it's the first Doctor Who story that really gets to grips with the sort of dramatic potential of the idea of possession, you know, which again is another big Doctor Who standby. There's been a couple of stories prior to this where companions get sort of brainwashed, you know, the War Machines and the Macro Terror, and the Doctor has to sort of deprogram them and all of that. But this, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I might have forgotten one earlier, but I don't think that any story before The Abominable Snowmen does that thing of having possessed characters sort of speaking in tongues, you know, Padma Zambavar speaking through Victoria's mouth, and it's quite uncanny. And, you know, later on we get Sarah Jane with the spider on her back, or Tegan with the Mara, or, you know, Mestor the slug communicating through the medium of Maurice Denham. But which we've
you
all
make that sound like a sort of folk horror practice.
Yeah. Well, it's
up there with country dancing.
That's right.
You've got Maurice Denham and country.
Through Maurice Denham and country. Of course, Kate Bush does communicate through the medium of Maurice Denham in Hounds of Love. You know, that is Maurice Denham's voice going, "It's in the trees. It's coming," at the beginning of Hounds of Love. It is.
I did not know that.
It's a clip out of Night of the Demon, the film, and it's Maurice Denham who actually says those lines. Yeah. So there you go. Not a lot of people know that. But yeah, Padma Zambavar, he's kind of like the heart of the story, isn't he? And he is another kind of, I think, first instance of a Doctor Who trope, which is the sort of the character whose life has artificially been prolonged by the alien power into this sort of agony of living death and all of that. And there, you see, I can't help but think about Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe, because in so many ways, The Abominable Snowmen kind of feels like the first Hinchcliffe story, you know. It's the setup is very much that classic early Tom Baker scenario, you know, the sort of the malevolent alien force trapped but about to spring free with the help of its human puppets. You know, Morbius, Eldrad, Mandragora. Mandragora, another story starring Norman Jones, by the way, who plays Chris Song in this story. But in particular,
filmed in Wales,
filmed in Wales, exactly, North Wales at that. But especially, I think the one that really kind of chimes in from that era is Pyramids of Mars. I mean, the idea of poor old Padmasambhava being kept alive for the intelligence, it's rather like Marcus Scarman, isn't it? This sort of animated thing. But he's also a bit like Sutekh, Padmasambhava, sitting there in his inner sanctum, and particularly in the last episode when the Doctor goes in and then gets sort of psychically zapped by Padmasambhava. That's total Sutekh, isn't it? It's kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, Padmasambhava really works as something a bit different from the usual big bads, because he's, at heart, he's a good person who has just been possessed by this thing that's entered into his consciousness.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, he's the Doctor's old friend from another previous unseen story, which again is quite unusual. In fact, is that a first too?
It might be a first. I think there's...
It might be. He's been to the planet...
I think it probably
I think in the rescue they talk about...
I was just going to say, he's been to Dido, but it's not as if he meets someone, though, is it, who he met before? But so there are things where he's been to the planet before, but I wonder if Padmasambhava is the first character who's a new character who is an old friend of the Doctor. That's an interesting one,
So what we've established on average is that this is perhaps the most typical Doctor Who story. With the benefit of hindsight. This is bang on average. It ticks every box, does everything we subsequently expect the show to go on and become.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's, does that make it a sort of radical... sort of milestone, or does it just mean that as you said, it's just like it's the essence of everything that's typical, all the most obvious ideas kind of coalesce here and then break out from there? I don't know. I mean, I think it works very well. I mean, I'll tell you another one. There's another one, isn't there? Is the Battle of Wills in the last episode, this sort of telekinetic sort of mind over matter showdown between the Doctor and the villain. Again, I think it's the first one of those, and later on we'll have Morbius and those sort of battles with the Master and Omega, whatever. So that's one, and of course they do it again in the Web of Fear, don't they? The Battle of Wills, and also again in the Mind Robber. So it works so well here that they try it at least twice more in the Troughton era. Actually, the Mind
in very short succession.
Indeed, yeah. The Mind Robber, which of course is a lovely story, and it's of course a totally different setup, but underneath the very different trappings, it does strike me as being very similar to the Abominable Snowmen. It's got the old man who's been trapped, and he speaks sometimes in his own voice and sometimes in the voice of the alien intelligence that's possessing him, and they have a big mind battle at the end. But I mean, of course, in the Mind Robber, it's a totally different. It's played for laughs apart from anything else, very successfully. But in the Abominable Snowmen, that mind battle at the end is actually genuinely quite unsettling, quite eerie, and that's something I find. One of the things I really like about this story is that it does feel quite momentous. There's a sort of gravity to it, which is quite... I mean, Troughton is... I mean, he's always good, but he's really giving it some weight in this episode, in this story.
He's very, very serious throughout. And I think a lot of what you're saying can be attributed to specifically the vocal performance of, and I forget the gentleman's name who plays Padmasambhava.
Wolf Morris.
Is it Wolf?
Wolf Morris.
Wolf Morris. I was going to say Wolf Thomas, but that's a band. Yes, because he doesn't play it. He doesn't go sort of Richard Breyer's kind of husky or putting on any kind of dramatic effect. He's just very sibilant and quiet, and
of course he does these
palpable menace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he does two things, doesn't he? He does his own voice, which is this wonderful sonorous and, as you said, extremely slow delivery, but it's very effective. and then he switches to the being possessed by the intelligence, and he's suddenly doing this very raspy, sort of aggressive thing. And that's quite spooky.
I think some of the other actors in the story were somewhat miffed at his slow delivery because it meant that some of their lines would end up getting cut. So long.
That is how you get the maximum paycheck.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was actually a 4-parter
it was actually a Hartnell story, but it went on so long.
Exactly, but it went on so long. No, I think he is wonderful, though. I mean, it's one of the great. Every now and then in Doctor Who, you get a performance of such power just vocally. I mean, again, Sutek, Gabriel Wolf doing Sutek. Oh, Wolf, Gabriel Wolf, Wolf Morris. That's interesting, isn't it? But I mean, they're both. I mean, I think Wolf Morris's performance anchors this whole story and it gives it its really eerie spin. I'll tell you here's a fascinating fact, because I leapt straight in there with my Nigel Neal answer on the Abominable Snowman film.
I sure did.
Here's the thing: Wolf Morris, Padmasambhava, had previous form in this whole Tibetan Yeti business, because not only is he in that Hammer film, The Abominable Snowman, but he was recreating the part that he played in the TV version before that. He's in both of them, playing one of the main characters, a Sherpa. I can't remember the name of the character, but yeah, the TV play was called The Creature. 55, I think, and then 57 was the film. Anyway, so Wolf Morris Padmasambhava is in the Hammer film, The Abominable Snowman. He's got
previous.
And then he's in the Doctor Who story, The Abominable Snowmen. Wonderful actor. He's a wonderful actor. He's you can, if to see him in real life, the best place to catch him possibly is in the Keith Michell series, The Six Wives of Henry VIII. He plays Thomas Cromwell in that, and he's very good. He's also, he was the brother of...
Such a shame there aren't that many photos of him as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As Padmasambhava, yeah. So his brother was a well-known actor, probably better known than him, Aubrey Morris, the guy who's in The Wicker Man and... he's in Clockwork Orange, he's in all sorts of things. He's the captain of the Golga Frincham B arc in the TV version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The guy in the bath with the rubber duck. Yeah, that's Padmasambhava's brother. Yeah. So no, he's wonderful. He's absolutely wonderful. And he gives it a real gravitas. I mean, that character is I mean, it's horrific, really, isn't it? The sort of the fact he's been kept alive for 300 years or whatever it is, and is desperate to be released and die. I mean, it's not like cozy tea and crumpets Doctor Who, is it? It's and also we're not all that accustomed, certainly at this stage in the series, to seeing the Doctor showing fear, but again in the last episode it was clear that the Doctor, Troughton gives it full value. He's frightened of going into the sanctum, and then he goes in and the door closes behind him, and then we just hear him scream, and we're out there in the corridor with Jamie and Victoria, and it's really odd and unsettling. I mean, there's quite a lot in this story that is really properly uncanny, I think. I mean, the Great Intelligence as a concept is quite sinister. I mean, really quite disturbing. There's a bit. I've jotted this down when I was watching it again, because the way the characters talk about it is, Travers has this line where he says, "A feeling of evil, like a shadow on my mind, felt as if I was going to drown." I mean, that's quite heavy, isn't it? That's like describing some sort of
very evocative, isn't it?
It's almost like talking about, I don't know, depression. It's a bit like the Dementors in Harry Potter or something like that, isn't it? It's really it's quite sinister and quite sort of hefty stuff. And then Songson killing Chrisong is quite a shocking moment as well. Because we've grown to quite like Chrisong by this stage, even though he starts off being a bit of a fly in the ointment. But although Chrisong's death scene is slightly spoiled for us these days, because of course this is long before Queen had their most famous hit, but Chrisong's death speech as he lies there on the floor begins with him saying, he says to the Doctor, he says, "Too late, my time has come," which is a line from Bohemian Rhapsody.
Doctor, just killed a man.
So that's rather marvellous. But I love that. I love it when there's inadvertent quotations from things in... There's a bit in The Time Meddler where Stephen, Peter Purvis, says, "I don't know much about history." he literally says that line. So I don't know.
I thought you were going to say something about fat-bottomed girls.
Yeah, no, he doesn't know. No, it's not a Queen one, well, I don't know, maybe it was deliberate. And of course, there's that bit in Terminus where Nyssa says, "I am adamant," but that again was probably no, I'm adamant. So, yeah.
But that was a fib, and that's been disproved.
Yes. I wanted to say a bit about the way it's directed as well, because I think it's such a well directed episode. That's early on in Doctor Who, because it was so seat of the pants and being done in such tiny studios, if a director could make their mark even slightly, it was an achievement, and they did. I mean, this is the great thing, people like Waris Hussein and Douglas Camfield quite early on were really, quite stylish stuff. But by the time you get to this period, there's a little bit more time, because there's a bit more film and there's a bit more whatever, But I think it's Gerald Blake. He only did 2 Doctor Whos. He did this one, and he did The Invasion of Time, which is a slightly odd pair, isn't it?
I mean, that's two absolute Stone Cold classics for me.
It's a bit weird. But anyway, The Abominable Snowmen is fantastically well directed from what we can see from episode 2, basically, because the shots are just brilliant. He choreographs the cameras really cleverly. He puts objects and indeed extras, people in the foreground, in the extreme foreground. And the lighting is wonderfully stark, which it's almost expressionistic. There are big areas of shadow, and of course that creates the effect of making these already wonderful sets look even bigger than they are. And
They did look fantastic.
It just looks great, doesn't it? There's a bit where the monks are moving through the monastery in part 2, where the camera's just travelling along,
scanning shot.
It's just lovely. And there's an amazing bit in part 2 that it kind of takes my breath away, because it's very simple, but it's so assured the way it's done, where we're in the sanctum and Abbot Songston is talking to Padmasambhava after Tomni's gone, I think, and the camera is looking at Songston, so it's like it's Padmasambhava's point of view. And Gerald Blake is shooting through a translucent gauze, which at this point is completely invisible. You can't see it because of the way that it's lit. And then there's a lighting change, and the camera pulls back at exactly the same moment. So when the lighting changes, the gauze becomes visible. It goes sort of mushy and fuzzy and white, and you can only just make out the abbot through it. So the effect is that we have suddenly sort of pulled back through this curtain, and now we're in the inner sanctum with Padmasambhava, and it all happens in this one unbroken shot. It's really proficient. It's really clever, and full marks. Good old Gerald Blake. Very good indeed.
He sounds like he was like a really good director in terms of his relationship with the actors as well. You see a lot of the interviews, and they were saying how he was quite fond of having a joke whilst out on location. And just helps to keep the morale up.
Oh, absolutely! It makes all the
filming
difference.
Away from
home.
I
mean, when you're on the set with if you have the director's job obviously is to deliver a good show, but a really important part of being able to deliver a good show is keeping everyone buoyant and taking them on that journey with you and making, because when you're up a hillside in Snowdonia and it's freezing cold and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, it's not necessarily going to be the best day you've ever had, and it's the director's job to make sure that everyone is having a lovely time. And it
now, I'm not
really
suggesting that all actors are all massive egomaniacs, but to be able to corral all these various people and keep that sort of energy going, I think that's
absolutely
something to be
commended.
Really
important. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important part of the job. So and as you say, he was evidently very popular. He directed quite a few sort of fantasy things. He did. I think he did some of the Omega Factor and a couple of episodes of Blake 7. He did that episode of Blake 7 with Tarrant's brother, Stephen Pacey playing his twin brother.
I just watched that.
Did you? Yeah, that's Gerald Blake.
I saw that about a week ago. Yeah. I've been watching it for about 3 years now, trying to watch Blake 7 for the first time.
Oh, right.
I get fits and starts with it, but that one was very adroitly directed.
Yeah, it's a goodie.
Certainly the sequence at the end where you've got the two of them kind of pursuing each other through the abandoned warehouse in the middle of nowhere.
The old abandoned warehouse.
On this alien planet.
The abandoned warehouse on the alien planet. Is it the
Yeah.
I think it's the same abandoned warehouse as the one that appears in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, but I might be wrong about that. But that's
I hope so.
But it's Death Watch. Good episode. Yeah. So anyway, that was one of his. Good director. Very good indeed.
Yeah, I feel, and again, this is obviously just based on the remaining episode we have to judge it on, and again, part of it maybe is the quality of the film that we're left with, but it did seem to be a really strong production in terms of the direction, in terms of everything, lighting, locations, the generosity and distribution of location footage throughout the story. It just felt so sophisticated.
Yeah.
Judged against where the show had been even maybe a year previously. It feels like we've taken a kind of low-key quantum leap.
Absolutely.
And I'm not suggesting that 60s Who can often look cheap, but I think it looked like the money had been spent well in this one.
Doesn't it? It does. I mean, certainly in the existing episode, and I don't know whether anywhere else it would fall down, but it doesn't look, there's no one element to it that you sort of have to suspend your disbelief and go, oh dear, that's a pity. I don't know, maybe the foam machine might have looked a bit naff because we're so used to it, but hopefully not. But I think it looks great. I love the Yeti. By the way, I love the Yeti. I actually whisper it, I prefer these Yeti to the ones in the Web of Fear. I think they look better. They, I'm not here to diss the Web of Fear. The Web of Fear is fantastic, but they've, I don't know, they sort of redesigned them supposedly to make them scarier, but I don't know.
Right.
They've got sort of bamboo belts, which I've never really understood, and a strange beak on their face. And
they've got a lot. They've got a lot less junk in the trunk as well.
Yeah, there is that.
I don't know if you're. If you're a hits man.
No, that's true. And maybe that was a logistical thing, because of course the Web of Fear has got a lot more studio Yeti. Going up and down tunnels in the underground with those great big.
Those tunnels are not wide.
No,
that would be.
So there is that. But I think the Abominable Snowmen Yeti look great. Interesting. Here's the thing I noticed. I'd never really noticed before, unless I missed it. They don't roar. They roar in the Web of Fear, but they don't make any noise in the Abominable Snowmen. That's interesting.
That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, I think they look great. There's again the sort of received wisdom is they were all too cuddly and they weren't frightening, and therefore they made them more frightening in the Web of Fear. I don't know. Are they more frightening in the Web? As I say, I'm not here to say bad things about the Web of Fear, which is a fantastic.
I think they're
story.
probably more believable as an animal before you find out that they're a robot in this story. If you're coming to it fresh in Web of Fear, they look a bit more robotic and a bit more alien.
The robot thing is funny, actually, isn't it? Because so far I've been entirely positive about this story, but it's not perfect. There are a few things that and one of the things that is kind of peculiar about it, but it can't be resolved unless you pull the whole thing to pieces, but I do find that there's a slightly odd disconnect in this story between the sort of the metaphysical threat of the great intelligence, which is all about astral planes and mental possession, and then the rather sort of prosaic business of Padmasambhava being made to spend 200 years building some robot Yeti. Pyramids of Mars is a bit like that, isn't it? Robot mummies building a rocket, and even the Mind Robber has got a computer controlling the land of fiction. And I know that's okay, it's fine, it's a Doctor Who-y thing, but I don't know, I quite like it when these mystical stories just go the whole hog. Planet of the Spiders or Snake Dance, of course, that's a good example. They deliver that sort of abstract, transcendental alien menace without any resort to computers and dials and robots and things.
Wouldn't it have been lovely to have had an episode or a prequel episode where it's just Padmasambhava with a big workbench and he's going, put lead A into tab B.
No, he'd speak a lot more slowly than that, so that's why it took him 300 years.
Exactly. Only another 150 years to go before it's extraordinary, really, isn't it? So, there is that. But, what would you do? It wouldn't be the story that it is if you did change that. I suppose you could have had the intelligence taking over genuine Yeti or something.
I think it's a chance to have a cool little visual shot of the controller balls travelling around of their own free will. I think that's a nice
You do like watching balls
touch.
Moving about, don't you?
Of their own free will.
I do. There's nothing I like more.
Yeah. And actually, the sort of the gimmick or whatever you want to call it of the spheres is great. That's nice. That's a good Doctor Who idea. And the part 2 cliffhanger is brilliant because it's entirely visual, and it's the point at which the viewer gets to put 2 and 2 together and realise that these bleeping balls speak to each other, and that the ball is the thing that is the power source.
Yes, they're connected.
And in a marvellous piece of dramatic irony, we, the viewer, get that before the Doctor and the companions get it. We understand it before they do, and that's marvellous. That gives you a really nice, scary cliffhanger because we know something that the Doctor doesn't, which is that's really nice.
Ramps up. It
does, and of course that's kind of the beginning of a thing, isn't it? The whole sort of power source. It's a bit like the Nestine spheres, isn't it? The energy unit thing, So that's a kind of the idea of this intelligence that inhabits the monsters and then withdraws itself from them. It's a bit like the Autons. It's a bit like the Animus, in the Web Planet, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, the Web of Fear sort of goes a bit Web Planet, doesn't it? Obviously webs, but the TARDIS gets trapped in space and dragged down, and so there's a kind of a slightly, oh God, maybe Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln based it on the Web Planet. well, it's a thought.
well, considering how that could have gone, aren't we lucky?
Extraordinary.
Hey, you gave it 10 out of 10.
I
loved it.
I love the Web Planet.
I loved it, but I wouldn't have wanted to watch it 3 times.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
you get serious tinnitus.
You do, yeah. Oh, that Zarbi sound effect is a bit much, isn't it? Yeah. So no, look, I love this story, but as I say, yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, despite what I said earlier on, it is, of course, basically another base under siege story, albeit one that's got quite a vividly different sort of setting from the usual scientific base. But it does mean that, in the middle episodes, because they're all 6-parters, these stories as well. Well, not all of them, but nearly all of them are 6-parters, and it inevitably sags a bit in the middle, and there's a bit of treading water. And Chris Song is a really interesting character. I think all the characters are quite well delineated in it, but and he's very well played, of course, by Norman Jones, wonderful actor. But there are times when he is effectively fulfilling the role of the stubborn base commander who refuses to listen. And he kind of does that a bit to keep things ticking over and to put barriers up for the Doctor refusing to listen to everyone. And Travers,
but it's a refreshing change that he sort of he turns on that after I think episode 2, and then becomes your kind of favourite character who isn't a member of the TARDIS team. I think that's a really nice,
that's
nice little pivot.
Absolutely true. As I say, so by the time he dies, it's very sad and quite shocking. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but no, it's a nice little set of characters.
Ian, you mentioned the TARDIS team there.
I did.
I think they've really settled in now, this new team.
Well, they have.
You've got that lovely scene at the start where they're rifling through the chest to try and find the Ghanta. Yeah. And Jamie finds a set of bagpipes.
Yep.
And a nice little bit of comedy there. So I feel like they've really settled in now.
They have. And also, Jamie, I think in this story, feels a lot less, block capitals, Route 1 kind of writing and performance. Yeah. He's a lot more composed and restrained and sustained with none of the kind of stuff they used to bolt onto the character to flesh him out, like the Phantom Piper or what have you.
Yeah.
So he was really good, and Victoria as well was. I quite enjoyed where she's hypnotised at the end, and she sort of says the same thing 3 times. And it took me a long time to realise that this was because she was hypnotised. I just thought it was very, very poor writing. But she is still really lovely, and this is before I think we reach the point where the character maybe begins to drift, shall we say.
She's still got a bit of guts there, hasn't she? She's obviously frightened in places, and you would be if you're in that situation. But she's got a bit of gumption about her, and I like that.
Yeah.
So it is a very good outing for the 3 of them.
Great trick with Victoria pretending that her drink was poisoned. That bit is that's a nice bit of sassy companion there. Yeah, it's just, I mean, her personality at the beginning of the story seems to change a bit depending on what the script needs her to do. Because to start with, she's the one who's mad keen to go out and explore, and Jamie says no, and then they kind of swap over, and she suddenly wants to go back to the TARDIS, and Jamie wants to carry on exploring. And then later on, she acquires this rebellious streak because she wants to go and find Padmasambhava in the inner sanctum. It kind of buffets her about a bit, but no, she's great. She's great. It's a really nice team. It's an interesting team, isn't it? I mean, you've probably said this in previous podcasts, but of course, it's suddenly in mid-Hartnell you get it's the Doctor and 2 futuristic companions, Vicky and Stephen, and this is the first time we've had 2 historical companions, Jamie and Victoria, and it's quite interesting that what that does to the dynamic of the show, that they haven't heard of, Jamie's never heard of the Himalayas, he doesn't know what they are because why would he, and this sort of thing is quite interesting.
Quick, someone think of something negative to say, or we're just gonna drift away on a tide of
I think this story does feature the world's worst guard.
Oh.
On the doors. Now, I know he gets the old mind control trick.
Oh, he does keep letting people in and out at the wrong time, doesn't he?
He does, doesn't he? He's like... the classic one is where Travers is like, oh, yes, thank you very much, thanks, cheers, I'll be off now. And he says, he's just told me I can go. oh, okay, then off you go then, bye.
No, it's all right. He said I could go. Oh, fine.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just let him go? Yes. Oh, bugger.
Yes.
So, yeah, there was
he's
that.
a bit of a twit,
That's
isn't
kind
he?
of funny,
Yeah.
but, you know,
Yeah.
he is a bit.
Yeah. It's
Tomney's lovely.
Tomney's lovely, actually, isn't he? He's a lovely. You get those sort of helpful, noble characters who sometimes can be a bit sort of boring, but he's just so he's nicely written and beautifully played by lovely David Spencer, who I got to know quite well back in the day, because 100 million years ago I used to do quite a bit of interviewing and things at Doctor Who conventions. I'm talking about back in the 1980s. Before I became one of the lunatics who joined the asylum, I was a Doctor Who fan who went to conventions, and I knew David, and of course his partner was Victor Pemberton, and I got to know them quite well, and they're absolutely lovely pair. He was a dear man, very, very good actor. He was the first actor to play Just William on BBC Radio, David Spencer, as a boy.
Right.
He was a child actor and did all sorts of things, but he's a very handsome man, and I think he's a really good actor. He's really excellent in that part. I think he does it beautifully.
Yeah,
it's a good cast all round, isn't it? I mean, there's him and there's I've mentioned Norman Jones, and we've talked about Wilf Morris at length, and of course, dear, lovely, wonderful Jack Watling. I mean, he's a film star. He was Debbie's dad, so but he's like proper actor, and I mean they're all proper actors. What am I saying? But no, he's like quite a coup for the programme to get someone like him.
Just let me subvert something you were saying earlier about this story kind of cementing a lot of tropes.
Yeah.
I'm going to maybe suggest this story subverts one trope by having no one in it giving a questionable performance at all. Everyone is absolutely solid, and I'm not sure that you can say that about all the stories that follow it.
No, you're right.
You might have made a good point there.
And I think you're dead right. I don't think anyone's turning in a duff one, are they? There's a slight. I'm not just looking for negative things to say, but there
must be something.
I suppose, and of course, we look at this far more sensitively these days than we did than we did on the day I was born in 1967.
Yes.
I wasn't looking at it sensitively or not. But,
you had probably other things on your mind.
Exactly, I was too busy. No, I mean, obviously we're talking about one of those stories where it would not be done this way these days, because we've got various people playing Tibetan monks, and there's a slight sort of lack of consensus about whether we're going for doing Tibetan voices or whether we're not, because there's a couple of smaller parts in the cast who are, by the sound of it, from the audios, kind of going for it a bit on the shall we say the Choji front, which of course is not what would be done nowadays. But that's it. Look, it's 55 years ago, for God's sake. Let's not get frantic. It's just that's it is what it is, and it wouldn't be like that now. But it doesn't feel. I mean, I don't. It doesn't feel horrid to me. It doesn't feel in any way this needs to be cancelled. It's just just of its time, and okay.
We were talking to Tim from the Missing Episodes podcast a while ago, and he was saying that he's got things that were concurrent on his DVD shelf that would really, appall you that was even broadcast. And he was talking about things like the Black and White Minstrel Show was this massive thing.
And it went on until the late 70s, the Black and White Minstrel Show. I mean, really late. Anthony Hopkins played Othello in the BBC Shakespeare in something like 1982 or 83 or something. It's the Abominable Snowmen is ancient history. But
his argument was that with Doctor Who, it always seemed to be coming from a sort of a respectful place. It wasn't like a mockery. It was more of a...
I think that's certainly more true in this story than possibly some subsequent examples. I think that because there are no sort of egregious, small g, grotesque kind of attempts at the look or the sound, that it's not even challenging.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe by the time you get to Wang Chiang, it's perhaps a little bit more in your face, and therefore you've actually got to respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's complicated, isn't it? That's the thing. It really is not simple. It's but I don't. The idea that I mean, I do think, for example, that the portrayal of Choji in Planet of the Spiders, and again, by the way, there seems to be zero consensus about there's that performance, and then there's Kanpo Rinpoche, his alter ego, and one of them's doing turned the Tibetan Lama performance up to 11, and the other one's just his old bloke sitting in a chair just being kind of English. But the thing, how it would be beyond ridiculous to suggest that the people who made Planet of the Spiders were a bunch of evil racists who were trying to, get away with some kind of nasty portrayal of. I mean, that's, Choji is a sympathetic character. He's a good person. He's it's just, it is complicated because of course we wouldn't do it like that now. Of course we wouldn't, and it's right that we wouldn't. But it's not. It's intellectually inadequate to just look at Planet of the Spiders, or indeed the Talons of Weng-Chiang, and say the people who made that were bad people. That's just ridiculous. You have to factor in the passage of time. The
context of the time. I mean, 2,000 years ago, an actor could be. If an actor in the amphitheatre caused offence to the king, he'd be taken away and beheaded. And
yes, absolutely.
Audience responses to texts change over time. And
absolutely.
Productions.
And all the female characters would be played by men because it was unseemly for women to be on the stage.
So in many ways, it's improved.
Well, yes, I think so. Of course, absolutely it has. Absolutely. Of course, talking of female characters, the Abominable Snowmen is also a member of that sort of dishonourable brand of old Doctor Who stories that has literally no female characters in it apart from Victoria the Companion.
It's a sausage fest, isn't it?
But I mean, okay, we're in a Tibetan monastery, so fair enough. I mean,
this is a great example of where that's totally fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, when you get to something like, for example, The Mutants, where there are no female characters at all apart from Jo, that's slightly less explicable. But,
that's weird.
Yeah, in fairness, the Abominable Snowmen probably gets away with it more than some. But there we are. Yes. Oh, I'll tell you what I've got to mention, because obviously I have to, because I have David Bowie Tourette's. I've got to talk about the the David Bowie connection with the Abominable Snowmen. Do you know about this?
Go on.
Oh, was he in it?
No.
Was he getting up?
He was playing Harold Pinter in the background.
Exactly. People think it was Harold Pinter, but actually, no.
Actually, it was David.
No, not that. And he was the shortest and coolest of the Yeti operators. No, he wasn't. No, it's nothing like that. But no, here's the thing. At the time that the Abominable Snowmen was made, of course, Tibet was actually kind of a bit of a thing in 1967. I mean, obviously the Chinese invasion had happened quite some time earlier than that, but as part of the whole kind of swinging London hippie summer of love thingy, sympathy for the plight of refugee Tibetans was a kind of that was a thing that was in the air, and it was feeding into popular culture and pop music and this and that. And among the many people of that period who were steeped in, were getting very interested in Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism, was the 20-year-old David Bowie, who was not a successful act yet. He recently released his first album, but he hadn't had a hit yet. But he was in the midst of his first flush of interest in Tibetan Buddhism. His first album, which had come out a few months earlier, had a song on it called Silly Boy Blue, which is, all about Tibet and transcendental meditation and so on. But here's the thing. In November 1967, just after the transmission of The Abominable Snowmen had finished, David Bowie was at a charity event at the Dorchester Hotel in London, in Mayfair. And who should he be sitting next to at this charity event but TV's Fraser Hines?
Get away.
Fraser has told this story. He told me about it a few years ago. And what did they talk about? Did they talk about, the state of the nation, girlfriends, whatever? No. Apparently, the thing that Fraser remembers particularly was that David Bowie, who was a keen viewer of Doctor Who, complimented Fraser on the accurate pronunciation of Padma Zambavar in The Abominable Snowmen.
A lot of people would have got that wrong. Bad master.
Yeah, but no, we got it right. But it's really interesting because Bowie, when he got an enthusiasm, he absolutely seized it by the neck, and he was absolutely into it and immersed himself in it, and then quite often kind of moved on to something else quite rapidly. But at this point, he was absolutely steeped in... And the whole Tibetan influence, the Buddhist thing, did stay with him right through his career. There's no question about that. But at this particular point, he was very, very into it. And he had, around about this time, befriended a Tibetan refugee monk, a guy called Chimi Yongdong Rinpoche, who... was a Tibetan monk who had fled to Britain and had set up a Buddhist meditation centre and retreat in Scotland. A place called the Samyeling Tibetan Centre still exists, by the way, to this day. And Bowie had visited him there and gone along and things. And why am I telling you all this? Because Chimi Yongdong Rinpoche was also a friend of Barry Letts, and the meditation centre in Planet of the Spiders is absolutely based on that place up in Scotland. In the original storyline treatment for Planet of the Spiders, it's not set in deepest Mummerset, it's set in Scotland. And Chimi Yongdong Rinpoche, David Bowie's friend, was also Barry Letts' friend. He was the model for David Bowie's song Karma Man and for the character of Kanpo Rinpoche in Planet of the Spiders. So how cool is that?
That's amazing.
In the words of Patrick Troughton, oh my giddy aunt.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
That's incredible.
It's a bit of a yeah. So that's good. So it's nice to have. Yeah, but I love the idea of the up and coming young pop singer and young pin-up star of Doctor Who sitting next to each other at the Dorchester Hotel one night in November, and the pop singer saying to the actor, "Congratulations on pronouncing Padmasambhava correctly," in that thing about the robot Yeti. I mean, it's just beyond. It's amazing. Whoa, 1960s.
I want to hear loads more of these stories where Bowie would devote the next 10 years of his life to tracking down Doctor Who actors and beating them up for scientific inaccuracies. What sort of performance was that? Not a mind probe, that was rubbish. Yeah.
I think you'll find it's metabolistry.
I was with Gaylan Dorsey on metabolistry. That would have been wonderful, but maybe he did that. Let's not come up on Stalking Time for the Moon Boys yet, so I'm not sure how much of his time he devoted to
it may have been limited, to be honest, yes. I don't know if it was an ongoing thing. Although Tony Visconti did tell me a few years ago, Tony Visconti, David Bowie's producer and friend of long-standing, that when they all lived together in Beckenham at Bowie's place in Haddon Hall, around about the time that they were working on The Man Who Sold the World, so early 1970, Tony said Doctor Who was appointment television every week. So I like to think of course I have thought about this at length. Of course I have. I've thought about them sitting there watching Spearhead from Space and the Silurians and the Ambassadors of Death and Inferno, and then I've been thinking about the lyrics and the things on The Man Who Sold the World. And there are the occasional connection. There's a song on there called Saviour Machine, which is about a computer that takes over the world, and it's a little bit Inferno, a little bit Silurians, because one of the lines is a plague seems quite feasible. So obviously this is utter balderdash, but nice to think that
in my head he's sitting there on his sofa at 5:30, completely dressed as Ziggy, watching Doctor Who. Oh, it's another one with Pertwee. I like it.
See, that's the sort of quality insight you get.
Absolutely.
That was brilliant. I had no idea. I didn't realise he was a big fan.
No, he was very. I mean, Bowie was a huge fan of Quatermass. He was a young boy when that was on, and he, it absolutely, had a big impression on him because obviously in a lot of his songwriting there is this kind of science fiction shtick of one sort or another, and like many great science fiction writers through the ages, of course, Bowie used the science fiction idiom. It's not really about outer space; it's about inner. It's about our inner space, if you will. Quatermass, obviously, in particular, because he was quite young at the time, made a real impression on him. In fact, one of his early bands, in the 60s, well before even the time that we're talking about, we're talking a couple of years earlier, they used to do a sort of feedback-heavy, guitar-y version of Mars, the Bringer of War on stage because
Wow.
because of the Quatermass connection. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Cool.
Wasn't there talk at one point about him wanting to be in the Small Faces, or did I imagine that?
Well, he knew Stevie Marriott and all those people, and they kind of all. I think. Oh, do you know? I'd have to go and look. I think there is actually evidence that he did one night somewhere at a club because someone else didn't turn up.
Yeah.
He did get up on stage with them.
They
at
were
one
quite
point.
pally,
Yeah,
weren't
they all
Yeah.
kind of hung out together. But this is when they were all kind of starting out and playing the clubs and paying their dues and they all kind of flitted in and out of each other's dressing rooms and popped up on stage with each other every now and then. So yeah, I don't know if he was ever seriously going to be a member of the group, but yeah, it was not out of the question, certainly. Yeah.
So I think we've reached that point where we should give this story a score. And I am going to come to Nick first. What would you like to score this story out of 10?
Oh gosh, I'm so bad at this sort of thing. Marks out of 10. Do you know? I'm going to give it a smiley 8.5, heading towards a 9.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's fair. Ian, what would you like to give this one?
I'm glad that Nick went first because he's established, and obviously I've been on quite a few of these shows at this point, Mark.
One or two, yeah.
I've not questioned the numbering system, but if we can give 0.5s, I'm going to go 7.5.
Oh, okay. Any particular reason why we couldn't go up to the full 8?
It's 6 parts long. It's sort of it's difficult. It doesn't flag in the middle, but there is a very kind of procedural feeling that you do get on occasion, and even though it's a lot sharper and more dynamic than a lot of other stories that have 4 episodes of padding in the middle, I think it just falls short of the golden 8 for length and plotting reasons.
I think that's fair. I am going to give it a 9.
Oh, very good.
Because I'm going mad.
Were you doing that in the style of Padma Sambhavar? I am going to give it a 9.
Beautiful.
No, it's a long-standing favourite of mine, and I had a watch of the recon in advance of us doing this recording, and it just cemented everything I was really feeling about the story before coming to review it again. I just really love it. I think it's one of the pinnacles of the pseudo-historicals. So it's a 9 for me. So that's what we thought of the Abominable Snowmen. Let's find out what you guys think in our feedback section.
I've got mail.
Okay, well, let's hear what you guys had to say about this story. I'll start things off, and we've had some feedback on Mastodon. Yes, we are now on Mastodon Social, which is, if you're around and you fancy getting in touch with us, we are at AOTAS@mastodon.social. And first of all, we have heard from the Metabilis 2 podcast. And they say, the scene inside the TARDIS in episode 1 has playful character-driven dialogue. Jamie finds bagpipes. I could fix these easily. The Doctor, yes, I was afraid of that. Doctor finds a fur coat. How do I look? Victoria, Doctor, you look beautiful. Then Jamie mistakes him for a great hairy beastie, foreshadowing the Yeti. The scene's lovingly crafted, and it makes me smile just recalling it. Victoria, Jamie, and the Doctor were a wonderful team. And that's from David. And he has put a little postscript in there. It says, P.S. I love those rotund Yeti the best. So you're not alone there, Nick?
It's interesting, isn't it, this? We're getting a few fans of the original Yeti here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And next up, we have heard from Lucy McCall. And she says, I like it, but then I generally like stories with great hairy beasties in. And I like that Victoria gets to be adventurous and a bit sneaky. I haven't seen a reconstruction, but I saw the new animation and really enjoyed it. And she also chimes in and says, there's no getting away from the fact that Yellowface acting was never excusable. However common it might have been, but I think the animator's approach was the right one, and Gary Russell spoke very clearly and thoughtfully about it at the BFI screening. I've missed that, so...
Yeah, that is a really good point, isn't it? Because obviously, I mean, I remember talking to Gary at the time he was working on it. It was a difficult call, because if you recreate what was on screen, then you are basically, you are recreating some outdated yellow-face stuff that, as we've said earlier on in our discussion, simply wouldn't, and quite rightly wouldn't be done now. But if you change it, then you're kind of imposing something new on it that some people probably are going to start to disagree with it. But I think the line that they struck with the animation was excellent. I think it was really, really, really nicely done, personally.
Yeah, I think they did a good job there. Okay, so next up we have heard from Ian Clark. And Ian says, it's a little slow in places, but the setting is distinctive and the nature of the intelligence and the Yeti feels fresh too. As good as the animation is, there's a lot of quiet shuffling around that doesn't come across well as a cartoon. The surviving film episode is noticeably more engaging, making the Yetis both more cute and more menacing than the cartoons. Thank you, Ian. Some very good points there. Okay, moving over to Twitter, and we've heard from the World Enough and Time podcast. And they say, Episode 2 makes my heart glad. The running around in North Wales is so beautifully shot, and the monastery scenes are super cosy. I'm certain it would be a stone cold classic if returned. Can you do something about that? Thanks, with an X. Yes, obviously it's within our powers. So
Mark, if you just pop out, one of you, just nip over to probably somewhere, Sri Lanka maybe. There'll be a
Sainsbury's.
I've got it just here actually on the bottom shelf of my.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. Is it missing?
I bet you keep meaning to take that back to the BBC, don't you? Yeah. Just make a note to do it.
And we've heard from John Hood. Enjoyed reading the Target novelisation in school, however, the Web of Fear is peak Yeti and great intelligence. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a massive outlier in that opinion. Possibly. We have heard from Adrian Berry. And Adrian says, loved the book, found the audio recordings dragged, maybe as there was no incidental music. Glad it got animated though. Yes, I think the more that we can get animated, the better. And lastly from me, we have heard from the wonderful Simon Moore from Flight Through Entirety. And Simon says, an underrated story. I enjoyed the existing ep, but when I saw a Telesnap recon perhaps 20 years ago, I was hooked. It's a good example of when sound is used so effectively to create mood. The silences, the howling wind, the chanting monks, it all adds to the sense of isolation. Very much what you were saying, Nick, wasn't it? Great minds think alike, I think. And he also says, and of course the performances are all great, particularly Padma Sambhavar. The contrast between the whispering and the frail old man voice is chilling. And the shot choices whilst that is going on, fantastic. Yes, it's a bit slow, but captivating all the way through. Yes, he's a fan. Good on you, Simon. That's all from me. So, Ian, who have you heard from?
Well, so firstly, we've heard from Anthony Carroll. He says he loved it. It was his first Target novel. Won it at a fete. Great idea. But where was the snow? Maybe a tad too slow is his only grumble. 8 out of 10. So, yeah, again, the lack of snow has been commented on, but maybe the snow from this story is off with the ducks from the duck pond in the 11th hour. And maybe it's all leading to something we don't know about. Yeah. It's all building up. Mm-hmm. We've heard from Craig brackets, what's the script, close brackets, who says, definitely smells of yak, lol. Which I think, I could be wrong, I think that's a very deep cut reference to Retro Chew. Isn't that what caused one of the hosts to lose their sugar?
No, I was partly responsible for this because when I put the call out for responses from our lovely listeners, I asked, is it a Stone Cold classic or does it just smell of yak?
Oh, right.
So, I see. That was his response.
The Yeti fur costumes were actually made of yak fur, weren't they? I believe. Yeah. Yes. That's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Just checking. So that's quite Tibetan in itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Craig goes on to say, it's those BBC budget costumes that used to have me running behind the couch when I heard the theme music kick in. Well, fine, fair enough. Life of Sid says one of the Doctor Who books I read, loved it. The audio brings it alive, one of my favourites. The lovely Dave Kitchen says, in some ways, a very dull story. Now, I imagine in Dave's world, that's because it hasn't got William Hartnell in it.
Yeah,
therefore he's lost
possibly,
interest.
Yeah.
With several episodes where nothing actually happens. Oh boy!
Oh, hello.
Don't tell him about the next 20 years of the show. But it works just because of the characters, the beautiful and different setting, and a cool monster. And he's absolutely right and bang on the money there. DWSSG. I don't know what that stands for, but I'm sure someone...
DWSSG.
Yes. Doctor Who...
Secret Service.
Secret Service
Ghanta.
Ghost. Ghanta, yes.
There you go. Perfect. The holy Ghanta that was lost.
Very enjoyable, if a bit slow. Oh no, that's a review of me. Not helped by a lack of any music to give action sequences like Yeti attacks any pace. The Yeti don't even roar, but nicely atmospheric. The animation is sadly substandard for me. We haven't really talked about the animation, but everyone seemed to have very long forearms and very thin legs in the animation. I found personally. And in a follow-up message, he goes on to say, I first watched it at the NFT in 1983, sat in front of Pat Troughton himself, which was terrific. How marvellous. We've heard from this, I'm guessing will be Rob at the Doctor Who show, who says, a story that seems cooler in the mind rather than in reality. Concept, settings, characters, all very interesting and immersive. Reading it as a target novel only enhanced this further, but from what we can see of it, and the animated version, it's all a bit pedestrian.
Okay. Okay.
No, well, you know, we're a broad church.
Dissent is good.
In the Doctor Who fandom. Yep. Lively debate and it's all so good humoured. That's what I love about Doctor Who fandom. Oh, Jodie Who. We've heard from Jason at Gallifrey 1, who says the non-animated original is regressive, with most of the Buddhist monks as active antagonists, and even if the yellow face and bad accents were acceptable in 1967, and they shouldn't have been, they play even worse now. The novelisation, though, that's a banger. And Doctor Who Novels says, I agree absolutely. The novel is probably the best target of the lot. Now that's a bit of a mic drop moment,
thing, isn't it? Crikey.
That's a hell of a
theory
to
that's
trot
put a cat
out.
among the can of worms, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it isn't. It's Remembrance of the Daleks. Anyway,
it's the doomsday weapon. Everyone knows that. Anyway, sorry, no, go on.
Oh, they didn't even get the title right. Behave. Finally, I've got a message from Suki Clark, who says, love the book, didn't hold my interest when listening to the audio. Surviving episode was a bit boring. Didn't buy the animation. After Boflem42 slagged it off for being rubbish, and Chronoid Podcast put the nail in the coffin when they gave it a poor review. For a story I loved as a child, it has gone from beloved to unloved, if you will, over the years. And hello from the Punjab.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
So, okay.
Obviously visiting the fam as he writes.
Yeah.
We love Suki.
Oh, right, yes, good.
Yeah.
He's a legend. And next up, we've got some audio from Andy Moore.
Henry, Merv, thank you for meeting me here in the bar.
Watcha. Hello.
I find it helps the creative juices flow more freely. Excuse me. Now, about this script of yours for the Abominable Snowmen.
Abominable.
Yes. Well, I love the setting. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. That was my idea.
I love all the stuff with the monks.
Also my idea.
I love the monster, the Yeti. It's fantastic.
I'm very proud that was my idea too.
But, here we go. I'm not so sure about all this stuff about the Holy Grail actually being the bloodline of Jesus Christ after he married and had children with Mary Magdalene.
Yes, that's his idea. I bloody told you, Henry, didn't I?
Oh, come on, Merv. It's a cracking idea, and everybody knows that kiddies love Jesus. Well, be that as it may, Henry, I'm not sure it's particularly suitable or relevant to a Doctor Who story set in Tibet. Excuse me.
Fine, we'll take it out, and we'll put in that stuff about the Yeti's balls or something. Oh, come on, Henry, don't take it so hard. You can use the story again, can't you? Write a book or something.
I bloody well will. You'll see. I'll show you all. A book about the bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Oh, you pair of fuckers. What a load of bollocks. No one's ever going to get rich writing about that shit.
Oh, no, bastards.
There you go, Ian. What do you think of that one then?
That was brilliant. That reminded me of when I first started in book selling, and it was that Dan Brown and Related Publishing. There were about 3 years where
crazy, wasn't it?
Every paperback was about the Holy Bloodline of our Lord Jesus Christ, or the Crusades, or the Templars, or the Da Vinci aspects of it, or the non-fiction book that I think he was referring to there. And it was you could publish any old cack if you put that in it. So I of all of his stuff, and I love Andy's bits, and I've long maintained we should just have the opening credits, Andy's bit, and then the end credits, and then you and I could just have the night off. But this was one of the best, I think.
I would agree. Yeah. So thank you, Andy.
We love you.
And now we'll go to Nick.
Well, I've got pretty much across the board positive ones here. We've got Tim at the Missing Episodes podcast. He says, great concept, atmospheric setting, creepy villain. It's got its roots in a Nigel Neal story, which is a good start. Next up, I've got DJ Alpha T, who says it's absolutely bursting with atmosphere, but doesn't have enough story for 6 episodes, meaning there's a lot of padding, works better as a target book. Okay, so that was a little bit negative. I do get it does get it, episodes 3 and 4, there's a certain amount of people leaving the monastery, running up to the top of the mountain and running back down again and then coming back again for no readly apparent reason. A bit like the Ice Warriors, actually. That happens a lot in the Ice Warriors, doesn't it? People go off to the glacier and come back again for, quite a lot.
In fairness, Genesis of the Daleks is held up as this all-time classic, and there's a hell of a lot of running up and down.
Indeed, and journey times between the Khalid Dome and the Thal Dome vary massively depending on the needs of the episode. Yeah, sometimes you can do it in a couple of minutes.
I assume the giant clams too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, no, good. So, thanks for that. So, we have, here's Dwayne Bunny, my old friend Dwayne. Hello, Dwayne, in Hobart.
G'day, Dwayne.
Hello, Dwayne. He says, I genuinely enjoy this story more than The Web of Fear. Hey. Yeah, I'm with you, Dwayne. I love The Web of Fear. I keep saying that. I do love it. But yeah, nice to hear. No incidental music, bar the Buddhist chanting, makes it extremely eerie. I appreciated the animation, but I feel it was far too preoccupied with race-swapping original actors than giving us a proper recreation of the TV episodes. Okay. Yeah, interesting point. Okay, so 26 Glorious Years says, admired since I first saw the surviving episode as part of the Yeti Rarities section of the BSB Doctor Who weekend. Oh, right, that's going back a bit, isn't it? Who remembers that? I do. Yes. Marvellous direction, Marvellous direction from Gerald Blake, effectively lit studio sets, a standout performance from Wolfe Morris, and immortal lines such as, bung a rock at it. Yes. Oh, do you know, we never talked about that. It's got some great dialogue in it, hasn't it? That is a wonderful bit. I've got a clever plan. Or Jamie says, have you got a clever plan, Doctor? And he says, yes, I have. What are you going to do? I'm going to bung a rock at it. Brilliant. And there's that bit where the Doctor says this is one of those occasions when discretion is the better part of valour. Jamie's had an idea. Let's get out of here.
Jamie's had an idea.
Marvellous. It's got some nice little numbers in it, hasn't it? So yeah, very good. Nice point. Okay, who have I got next? Oh, I've got Pat Howe, who says, loved the Target novel. Not sure why it's not better thought of. Great atmosphere. Can't disagree.
I would agree, yeah.
Who have I got next? I've got Richard Smith. He says, loved the Target book when I read it back in 1975. Oddly, I found the extant episode rather dull when I saw it in the 80s, but very compelling on Lost in Time. Saw the animation at the BFI last autumn. It's quite sparse, with not many Yeti. would still love to see the original. Yeah, no, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think they had 4 in real life, as it were. They had 4 Yeti, and I think the animation kind of goes with that, doesn't it? I don't know if they ever go above 4. Yeah, which is, fair enough. They're kind of staying true to it. Last but not least, we have Philip Edney, who has sent us a nice, expansive 3-tweet thread, but it's good stuff. So he says, Philip says, I first fell in love with this story through the Target novel. There's lots of love for the Target novel, isn't there? That's nice. Yeah. I first fell in love with this story through the Target novel, a great story with beautiful locations and complex characters. From the one episode that we have, the location work looks amazing and performances top-notch. Patrick Troughton, as always, gives a complex and diverse performance. No real evil characters, but shades of grey, and the one kind of bad character you feel sympathetic towards. The sphere effect is great. It is actually, isn't it? The way those spheres move along is really impressive. You can't clever, see what they're doing. There's no wires and magnets and things. That's a really good point. Sorry, Philip, I interrupted your tweet. Let's go back. The sphere effect is great, and the lack of incidental music leaves the special sounds to do all the work. A beeping sphere builds so much tension. Lumbering Yeti look great, but they really were way too cute. This is another base under siege, but when it's done this well, you just don't care. Yeah. Can't fault that. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more there, Philip.
Well done, Philip. Yeah, thank you. That's good. I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for your feedback. It's great to hear what you guys all think of the stories that we're covering. And if you'd like to get in touch, we'll be listing all the various ways and means over our end credits. So before we say goodbye, we are going to go for some recommendations. Okay, it's time for recommendations. Nick, what would you like to recommend for our listeners?
Well, I hope this isn't going to be too much of a kind of a giant anvil falling on this thing, because it's a bit of a heavy recommendation, I have to say. But I just saw this film, which I've never seen before, and it is so astonishingly good that I just had to talk about it. I didn't know anything about it, and I first became aware of it a year or two ago when I saw Mark Cousins did this brilliant series of history of film. Did you? Or the story? Is it called The Story of Film? Yes, The Story of Film. I beg your pardon, Mark. The Story of Film. Fantastic series, which you can get on DVD and Blu-ray from Network, I think. So there you go. There's a recommendation straight there. That's like the subsidiary recommendation. It's a brilliant series, but Mark Cousins, who is so massively knowledgeable about film, and one of the brilliant things he does is that he takes us away from, just Hollywood and stuff that we know about, and shows us all the extraordinary other things that there are to be had. And this was something that particularly leapt out at me and Barnaby as we were watching this series. So we thought, we've got to get hold of it, and eventually we found it, because it has just recently been reissued by Criterion. It's been kind of cleaned up. So anyway, getting to the point, it's a 1985 Soviet film called Come and See, directed by a guy called Ilem Klimov, and it's a Second World War film. And we've all seen lots of Second World War films. We've all seen Saving Private Ryan. We've all seen Schindler's List. We've seen lots of films, and they're and we've seen lots of very good films. This is just something else, because of course when you see a film made in a different way, in a different culture, in a different... The vocabulary of the film is slightly different, and the way that it's presented, it's just, and again, just like I was saying about I'm not here to diss The Web of Fear, I'm not here to diss Schindler's List. Don't get me wrong, it's a powerful film. Yeah. But when you see something like this, it just makes you reconsider what you thought you knew about how to watch a film, and what you thought you knew about the Second World War.
Perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, it's called Come and See. It's about it concerns a boy, maybe 13, 14 years old, played by this lad called Alexei Kravchenko, and it's an extraordinary performance because he's very young, and it's just remarkable. And he's in what is these days is Belarus, and it's in the Second World War. So he joins up with the Soviet resistance against the Nazis who are, invading. And the whole film is just this boy being buffeted from one terrible experience to another as he wanders through the land and gets caught up in this attack and that ambush, and surviving each one just by the skin of his teeth as the atrocities mount up. And the the thing is, I mean, it is just extraordinary. I mean, technically, it's amazing. It's beautifully shot. It's full of Steadicam things and setups that last for minutes on end, single shots with huge things going on that just go on and on and on in a single camera shot, and it's just technically astonishing. But more importantly than that, it's emotionally unbelievably raw. I mean, it's just extraordinary. You might think that Schindler's List is hard-hitting. I mean, it is. Of course it is. But I promise you, this film, Come and See, makes Schindler's List look like an episode of Hello, Hello. I mean, okay, that's facetious, but it is quite extraordinary. I mean, it's not an easy watch. It's not, don't watch it for fun. No. And there are very complex issues within it of nationalism, not least because it was made in 1985 and, it had to be approved by Soviet censors. Apparently it took several years for the script to be approved before the film could be made. But watching it now, the present irony is acute, because this is a Russian film made in the Soviet era, towards the end of the Soviet era, but made about, specifically, an angry film made about the atrocities perpetrated by a dictator who has told his army that a nation that neighbours Russia has no right to exist. So watching that film today,
draw your parallels.
There's a whole new sort of mind issue there. But setting aside the sort of momentary politics of it, it is just an extraordinary piece of filmmaking. So it's Come and See, directed by Eilem Klimov, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's just extraordinary. As I say, it's not much fun, but it's amazing.
It sounds very harrowing.
Yeah, harrowing is the keynote. Yeah. But it's on Criterion, it's on DVD and Blu-ray, and just go get it and watch it. Oh my God, it's amazing.
I shall put some links in the show notes for anyone who's interested. Thank you, Nick. I am going to recommend something. As ever, I am incredibly late to the game on all these amazing things that have entered the zeitgeist. I am going to recommend a TV show that's very big in the UK. I'm not sure how it's done internationally. It's called Happy Valley. And it's it's written, produced, directed by a genius called Sally Wainwright. Nick, you're bursting to say something.
No, I so nearly just went with Happy Valley because it is. I mean,
really.
I'm totally not taking over here. This is your call. But oh God, it's
no,
as far as I'm concerned, it's right up there with I, Claudius and Secret Army and whatever you care to mention as one of the great British TV drama series. Anyway, I shut up. I hand back to you. It's amazing. Yeah.
There are quite a few Doctor Who links there for people like me who are nerdy about these things. The main star is, of course, Sarah Lancashire, who has featured in modern Doctor Who. And also we have George Costigan, who was in Voyage of the Damned. And it also features the wonderful direction of Eros Lyn in some of those episodes. So it spans 3 series. It first broadcast in the UK in 2014, so it's a bit of a slow burn, but it focuses on a female police sergeant played by Sarah Lancashire, who's one of the most memorable characters I've seen in a TV show. So amazingly acted. I think across the board, I don't think there's a weak performance from the whole cast. They're so good. So it focuses on her character and certain, I don't want to spoil it too much for anyone who hasn't seen it, but certain family trauma that she's been through, and that's connected with organised crime in the area where it's filmed. It's filmed in Yorkshire, and the scenery is absolutely incredible. When you see the shots they have of the surrounding area, it looks really amazing. It's so deftly written, the direction is spot on, the acting performances are all just off the scale. So we've just gotten to the end of the story now, and it's a barnstormer of a finish. I can't really recommend it more highly than that. Nick can probably say a lot more erudite things about it, but I just think it's a fantastic piece of television. It's
fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it's 3 seasons, basically. And the first 2 seasons were reasonably quick on the heels of each other, I think 2014 and 2016. And then it went to bed until now.
Yes.
As you say, it's very hard to talk about it without doing spoilers, but one of the reasons that Sally Wainwright kept it until now was that she wanted a very young character in the first 2 series to grow up to be old enough to carry the story to its logical conclusion. So this character who's a child in the first 2 series is now a teenager, and it's the same actor, and he's fantastic. I mean, when you have a sort of 9-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever he was to start with, and he was fine, he was good, but you simply don't know whether that 10-year-old is going to grow up to be a properly good actor, and my God, he has.
He was great.
Terrific.
Yeah.
No,
Really
I mean, it's just everything about it is fantastic. I totally agree with you, and everyone. But you have to start from the beginning. You absolutely have to start with season 1. There's no point in hopping on board halfway through.
No. If you're in the UK, it's all on iPlayer at the moment. So yeah, get on that. Iain, what have you got to recommend?
So I had a bit of a break in January from my French cinema odyssey. I only had a couple of Criterion films in there myself. So we should do a separate spin-off podcast about the Criterion collection. But what I did, I went back to my roots and read one of these here books that people talk about.
Books, yes.
I used to have to read about 3 books a week because I worked in bookselling and then in publishing for a long time. So it was, but I'm kind of out of the game now, and I don't read very much, and I don't really have so much of an idea of what's happening. So I went into a bookshop and I asked for a recommendation, and they gave me The 7 Moons of Marley Almeida, which it turns out won the Booker Prize last year, which is very embarrassing because I've always generally railed against books that win the Booker Prize because the best book always comes second. Nicola Barker. See, I'm still bearing a grudge. That was 2006. But this book by Shehan Karunatilaka, I'm probably pronouncing that wrongly, but I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce these very long Sri Lankan names. It's a novel about a war photographer who, page 1, wakes up, he's dead. He's just become a ghost, and he's given 7 moons, 7 days, if you will, to wrap up his business on Earth and progress spiritually towards the afterlife. It really reminded me of the good Salman Rushdie books. Salman Rushdie writes good book, bad book, good book, bad book, and this is up there with some of his better writings. It's rude, it's funny, it's warm, it's full of love, it's full of anger. Obviously, being set in Sri Lanka, it delves a lot into the kind of atomized society with the various different warring factions that have riven that country for the last God knows how long. And it does go on a bit, but it's worth it. It is just a really exceptional novel. So if anyone fancies, it's slightly cheaper than putting the radiator on. You can actually just read about a warmer climate, and that may make some difference. So that's my money-saving tip.
I believe that was on the blurb on the back. It goes on a bit, but it's worth it.
Yeah. That was a quote from Robbie. Actually, I'd love to read this quote from Robbie Millen of The Times. This magic realist and often funny novel, so low praise there, fizzes with energy and ideas. Imagine a mashup of Stranger Things and Salman Rushdie. Now, he's not specified what elements of Salman Rushdie. He's just taken the publisher's blurb, which was imagine a mashup of Stranger Things and Salman Rushdie, and he's regurgitated that on the back of this book. That's sadly where we've got to in marketing books in professional publishing. We say, it's this meets that, and a lazy journalist won't even tart that up. But the 7 books of Marley Almeida, strongly recommended.
I'll look that
Wonderful.
out. Thank you. Gosh.
Well, that's great. Before you go, Nick.
Yes.
Would you like to give anything a plug to what you've got going on at the moment?
Oh, gosh. Well, what can I tell you? Most of what I've been doing just right at the moment is connected in one way or another with the wonderful world of David Bowie, because I bless him, even now he's keeping me busy, which is a wonderful state to be in. So there's a new book coming out very shortly, next month, I think, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Aladdin Sane, which is, for those who don't know, that's the album with the famous zigzag makeup picture on the front. And this is a lovely book which collects together absolutely every shot taken during that famous photo session, of which there are many, together with a lot of text about the album and about the photo shoot and things. And various people were asked to contribute to it, and I'm delighted to say that I was among them. So between us, people like myself and my friend Kevin Cann, who's another David Bowie historian, and Charles Shaw Murray and various other people have written pieces about the individual songs. So I've done The Gene Genie and Panic in Detroit. So those are the two songs I was asked to do. So there's a whole. So that's a lovely book. It's a beautiful thing. I've seen it. It's fabulous. So that's about to come out. Been working on that lately. At the time of recording, obviously I don't know when this is going out. It may have already happened by the time this goes out. I don't know. But anyway, on the 11th of March 2023, I don't know if that's before or after you'll be listening to this, I'm going to be giving a talk at the Rosehill Theatre in Cumbria, where David Bowie performed with Lindsay Kemp before he was famous, when he was doing the mime show. The theatre, which is very proud of its little David Bowie connection from way back when, has invited me along to do a little talk about all of that. So that's a nice little thing, and that should be a nice, fun evening. And I've managed to get together some archive and some photos and some bits of video to show and things like that. So that should be a nice thing. In June 2023, I'm off to New York to compare a David Bowie convention. There was a Bowie convention last year in Liverpool, which they invited me along to, and I did the kind of Master of Ceremonies bit at it, and that went very well and was quite a success. There hadn't really been anything quite like that before. It's there's lots of Doctor Who conventions, we all know about those, but David Bowie convention, which I have to say was kind of exactly the same thing. There were the panels and the autograph queues and the all the same stuff. It was lovely because David Bowie fans are essentially the same as Doctor Who fans. The thing that they're into is a different thing, but the whole culture is exactly the same. There's the kind of dressing up, and there's the getting together in bars and talking in depth about it and sharing videos, just everything exactly the same. So anyway,
and lots of people arguing about if Tin Machine is canon.
Oh, absolutely, whether Tin Machine is canon, and it all went downhill after Station to Station, or whatever you care to, whatever your dropping off point. Oh yeah, all the same stuff. But anyway, no, that Liverpool event was joyful. It was lovely, and we had some wonderful guests along. People who'd worked with David over the years and things. And anyway, so same company is doing another one in New York City, if you please. So I'm going over there to do that in June, and we've got some fabulous people going. Tony Visconti, David's producer of many years standing. Mike Garson, the wonderful jazz pianist who played with David Bowie many times. Carlos Alomar, the fantastic band leader and guitarist. All sorts of people, loads of other people are going along. George Murray, who played bass with Bowie in the 70s, along with Carlos, who has never kind of done Bowie interviews and things before. He's going to come along, which is wonderful.
It's a bit of a coup.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the guy who played bass on Station to Station and Low and Heroes and Scary Monsters and all those albums. So fantastic stuff.
Fantastic.
So that should be good. That should be a lot of fun. So a lot of Bowie stuff. A lot of Bowie stuff at the moment. That's what's happening. So it's keeping me busy. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're keeping employed.
Yeah, well, me too.
Vested interest and all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you've got to pay the energy bill somehow.
Yeah.
Thanks so much to Nick for being such a great guest. And we will be back soon. We won't be getting rid of our thermals just yet because we have an appointment with the Ice Warriors. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.